for some more encouragement on this Devo series wherever you go. We're encouraging ourselves in this new year as we're continuing on through 2022 with whatever comes our way. Today we're talking about Acts 27. So remember Paul, the guy we've been talking about that was Saul, that was horrible, and a light from heaven struck him and he changed? Well, he's now got a new name, like we talked about last time, and he's going to all sorts of places telling people about God's love. And in this story, he and a lot of other people are on a ship in the sea, and lots of things happen on this ship that are worth noting. First of all, there's a kind man on the ship named Julius that allows Paul to visit some friends to get some of his needs met. Who knows what the needs were? Maybe Paul needed supplies or words of encouragement or just hugs. Remember, Paul had been in prison for teaching and in trouble for preaching. Once back on the ship, winds started blowing against the ship and even blew them off course from where they were headed. I know some of us feel like we've been blown off course for the last couple of years with life's winds as well. They had lost time on their trip and they were sailing in the wrong direction and everything had become dangerous. They came to a town called Fairhaven, and Paul spoke to those on the ship and told them it was not wise to sail on, but the people on the ship ignored and kept sailing, and the ship took a violent battering, and the people started to throw things overboard. It says that neither sun nor stars appeared for days, and that they had given up hope of being saved. So let's stop here. Paul must have been frustrated, but perhaps the provision and encouragement that he received when Julius let him visit those friends enabled him to face this storm with wisdom, even though the ones with him didn't listen and steered the group into a heap of trouble. In verse 22, Paul says, "I urge you to keep up your courage because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed." He reminded them of his warning, but he now also encouraged them that only the ship would go down and no one would die. That's a great encouragement, but I titled this Devo Staying with the Ship, and now it's going down. Even though Paul was on board the ship and on a journey to be tried for his criminal acts of preaching, he was able to encourage those on board, and they're finally listening after strong storms nearly destroyed them all. After that directive, they were approaching the land, and the storm was treacherous, and there were a few men that were trying to escape on a lifeboat, even though they were warned to stay on the ship. In verse 31, Paul tells them that unless they stay with the ship, they will not be saved. This time they obeyed. Poor Paul, he's up against his own fearful situation. He's having to steer all of these scared people to safety in the scariest of storms. And finally, he encourages them with an interesting sentence. Remember the Devo a few weeks ago called Never Missed a Hair, and I ended with the reminder that God has our hairs numbered on our heads? In verse 34, Paul tells those on the ship who are so hungry by now that they need to eat so that they can survive. And he says this, "Not one of you will lose a single hair from your head." Who knew we could be so encouraged on this life's journey by reminders about the hairs on our head? The end of this storm was that those who stayed with the ship, even though the ship fell apart right before land, swam to safety and lived. And in the next chapter, we read how Paul ends up at a house and was thankful at the sight of those that encouraged him. And after that, he was able to live and teach with boldness and no hindrances. So how is this story encouraging wherever we are going? The key notes here are that storms will arise, we'll be tempted to jump ship. But what does the ship represent? Is it a church building? Is it the security of family? Or just what is the ship? Because Paul told them not to abandon the ship in the middle of the storm, and yet the entire ship fell apart just before landing and they had to swim to shore. I'd say that the ship is the place where hope is the anchor. Paul offered hope and truth in God's love and protection, and that's what those sailing wanted to constantly lay aside in favor of their own strength and ability. But if there's hope, we're to stay with that. The ship itself fell apart, as will many of the places, the people, the situations in which we find ourselves. But when they listened to hope, the truth of God's provision and protection, that not one hair would be lost, they were able to land safely in the middle of a storm that took everything from them but hope. If there's one who offers hope in your ship, listen to them. If you're the one offering hope, be encouraged by those around you as God supplies your needs. And by all means, stay with the ship of hope, in which we were all saved, and that is the knowledge and the goodness of a good God that spares us in the middle of the worst if we stay with the ship.